Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sallenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with David Mederios about self-led civility with a lot of funk. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm excited you're here and I'm excited to be back. I had parts that said 100 episodes, the last episode, and Unburdening with Dick. We're done. Why would we continue? I mean, what a high note to end on. And then I had other parts that said, oh, but we're having so much fun and it's so fun to create and it's so fun to connect and we want to keep doing it. And then I also knew that summer was not a time to make this decision. Summertime, Tammy wants to hang out on the beach and play with my son and play in the water and rest. And I did that and I had a wonderful summer and I hope you did too. So, this episode 101, is heavy on the banter and it's heavy on the laughing. And what a great way to start season 3. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I am not going to be, at least for now, producing these weekly. I have been doing them weekly most of the time, and that's not going to happen this time. So, you will get 1, 2 a month. And there might be times there might be some weekly, I'm not sure, but as of right now, that's just how these are going to roll out. So I just wanted you to know that. I had to negotiate with my parts a little bit about starting this again, and that was the compromise that we came to, that we would start, but we would do so in a much more relaxed way, in a non-urgent way, and without the crazy schedule. And so that feels pretty good to my system. So that's it for me. I'm going to also try to make these intros very, very short. There's outlined on the show notes. There's all the links on the show notes. And that's what we're going to do too. We're going to make short intros. All the information you have is on the show notes. And we will begin. Of course, I would love for you to connect with me on all the socials: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Clubhouse at IFS Tammy and the One Inside Facebook page. Go to tammysallenberger.com to sign up for a free meditation. Enjoy.
Hey!
You wear a handsome suit?
Well, it's your podcast, so I figure at 101,
101.
I'll be presentable.
Oh.
Hey! Nice to see you. Wonderful to see you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So excited. I can't believe we're finally doing this. I know, it's been crazy.
And to be, you certainly tried, and you have put in significant and consistent effort.
Well, and then I had to call you. I mean, who calls anybody? I had to call you. It's the only way. Yeah, it's the only way to get in touch with you is to call you.
I will repent. I don't want to be irreverent, but I mean, our relationship is having fun and having laughs. So I assume that's where we are and where we go with this.
Yeah, completely. If we're too serious, boring, that's going to be the most boring 101 ever. We want to have fun. Yes. That's definitely.
There we go. Our goal is not to have the most boring 101.
Normally, when you take a class, Intro to Psych 101, that's boring. And this is episode 101, and it is going to be the most non-boring 101 experience the listener has ever had.
That's our goal.
Yes. Okay. All right. So speaking of non-boring, I want you to tell everybody, do you remember where we met?
The conference.
Okay. The conference.
The IFS conference, national conference.
Yep.
And what I remember is I saw this diminutive, powerful person and immediately felt a connection with you. And also your thirst of knowledge and your thirst to be know more about IFS, the training, all of those kinds of things, what was entailed, wanting to meet Mike Elkin. And,
that's right.
And also dancing.
Yeah, so I wanted to meet Mike Elkin because I wanted to do I wanted to PA his level 2. And yeah, so you hooked me up and I did. And now Mike Elkin and I are buddies. Yes. What was that face for?
No, because it was you that was where you were going. You wanted it. And I think probably for both of us, when I was studying and I saw the kind of people I really wanted to emulate, the senior trainers and the PAs, and when I asked them, how'd you get to where you are? And every single one of them said, without exception, that being a PA was one of the most important things they could do to really understand and absorb the model.
Yeah.
And then I took that to heart. So
Yeah.
that became my mission.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the other, we're going to go back to how we met, but that's the other thing that happened is you and I ended up, did we PA that together, right? That level 2 together. We did that in Boston, right? Yeah, that was fun. So, okay, so how I remember we met is I hate buffets, which I've talked about this before, and I was waiting and for on like the left side of this huge room. I was sitting at a table, everyone else had eaten around me, and I'm like, I'm waiting till the line goes down. So the line goes down, I go up, they had shut down the line. So I had to go to the other side of the room. I'm standing in line and you come up behind me and you are looking so handsome in your suit. And
I respect your opinion.
you were, and I was just like, I don't even know. I'm like a nervous wreck, the buffet. I don't know. I just want to go outside. I don't know what's happening. And we just started talking, and turns out you were like the main speaker for the conference. And yes, and so we can talk about that in a minute. And then later, was it that night or the next night during the dance party? So at these conferences, once during, I think it's like the last day or something, they always have these big dance parties. And so you and I had just seen each other around, and so there I go, and dance party, and I met your daughter.
Emily. Yes.
And Emily and I like ran around the dance floor teaching everybody the Cupid Shuffle, I think.
And would you do the something Joe too?
The Cotton Eye Joe?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So funny. Yeah,
and
good times.
You two led the group.
Yeah, it was so fun.
And it was such a relief given the intensity of the conference and the subject matter and people really being aware of things and conscientious of that, considerate. But boy, just to go out there and dance and just kind of let it flail, that was great.
It was great. Yeah, I totally agree. So speaking of that, how would you feel about telling everybody a little bit or as much as you want to share about what you presented on and why it was so serious?
Well, what happened is I was working with a young man that had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they had been hospitalized numerous times. And I found that they were getting farther and farther away and deeper into psychosis. I started doing EMDR with this young person. We got some traction, but it wasn't a lot. And I started working with this person as a very young child, not for schizophrenia, but some other things. But quite frankly, they were slipping away. Yeah. And I had started taking the IFS training, and I had just finished it and still didn't feel fully competent in it. But I thought I talked it over with this young person, and we said, let's explore it. And then I really started plugging in, and we started combining EMDR, the bilateral stimulation piece, with IFS. But IFS really started to get traction. And in some ways, all I did was just apply the IFS model to schizophrenia, or the voice hearing part, or the paranoia part. And we treated all of those as parts. And that became our model. And then we started transitioning from EMDR or bilateral stimulation slowly to IFS. Long story short, I knew I didn't have the skill set for something like this, and I certainly didn't want to learn on the proverbial job.
Yeah.
So I said, who's the man, who's the woman, who's the person? Dick, obviously, in the forefront of that. But I didn't know Dick, and quite frankly, I didn't trust Dick because I didn't know him. So I went to Chicago. There was a neuroscience, IFS and neuroscience conference training with Frank Anderson and Fran Booth. I went there to really scope him out, and scoped him out. After about almost like 4 or 5 days, I really felt like I had a sense of who he was. And I pitched the idea of, would he be willing to collaborate with me? And he said yes. And as I did when I presented the plenary, I was all kind of like cool and collected. I was like, "Oh, thank you, Dick. Oh, that'd be great." But
Right.
as soon as he left, I was like, "Yeah!" Dancing around in the place. And that set the stage. Dick and I collaborated for over a year, and I would bring this young person to Dick's house. We would film the sessions. I would work with him every week or sometimes twice a week in between. I would be able to always ask Dick for any kind of advice or help in the process of it. And we really applied this IFS model to that. And just with really, I feel nothing short of like miraculous results.
Amazing.
So, and this,
Yeah.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, what are you going to say?
Just the person's doing really, really, really well.
Amazing. I think it's amazing because when we think about this model, I think maybe we think, oh, it's not going to treat schizophrenia, or it wouldn't treat psychosis, or it's not going to treat this type of trauma, or it wouldn't treat this, right? Like, and so the idea that this model could treat schizophrenia is amazing. And then this kid could lead a pretty normal life when he was not headed that way. Like he was going to lead a very mentally ill life.
Yeah, he wasn't leading anything even remotely close to a normal life.
Yeah.
And he worked unbelievably hard in the process.
Right. I think that's the thing with any mental illness, right? That the people that I worked with, and I think this is true across the board, it's not like they're like, I'm right. Like they're working hard. They're taking their meds. They're going to the doctors. They're getting treatment. Like it's their full-time job.
Yeah.
It was really powerful. I feel like it was really powerful for, like you said, like the whole audience and even for Dick. And so thank you for that. And and your bravery.
Do it. And I was really surprised because he just kind of said offhanded about maybe halfway through, he said, "You want to present with me?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, okay, for what?" And he said, "Well, the plenary." And I honestly didn't even quite know what a plenary was. I was like, "Yeah, sure." Okay.
You're still gonna play it cool. You're like, I'm playing it cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we never really rehearsed anything. We just kind of went into he'd do a section talking about schizophrenia and the cost in so many different ways and spheres. I would do a piece, then he would do a piece, and we would combine, and then that just unfolded.
Well, it flowed. I mean, it worked.
Yeah. So I was really honored to do so.
Yeah, it was great. So speaking of that, this is a crazy transition, but I'm going to go ahead and make it. The idea that you're like, I don't trust anybody, and I don't trust people. I'm going to be a little bit, I'm going to scope it out, and I'm going to go right to the top. That reminds me of your book, of the idea of being this somewhat a little bit famous drummer and being like, oh, I'm talking to this other kind of famous drummer and he trains with this super famous drummer. And I'm going to be like, not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to hear about that. And I want to hear about your book, and let's transition to that if that feels okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I played in a band on the road for about 10 years. And I played from, I think I was maybe 20 to almost 30 years old. And I've always loved drums. I've always been attracted to drums. I used to play drums in a fife and drum corps, which is a traditional music of like the 1700s, George Washington, those kinds of things. But it was always about drums. So I used to practice, take lessons, and I auditioned for a band. I got in it, and I went from literally my basement to playing out. We started playing in July. We played almost 30 nights in a row. So it wasn't like a weekend, kind of a Friday or Saturday. That's what we did. We did it full time. And we were what they call road warriors. We just played and played and played.
And you're traveling to shows and traveling all over the country. And That's amazing.
Anywhere from Canada on down to Florida. I went out to California with the saxophone player Bobby DeCurtis, where we met Bruce Conti, who wrote the score for Rocky and the Academy Awards. And we promoted the album and we went there for that. It didn't take off, but we were still doing those kinds of things and doing concerts throughout the East Coast.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but the
So
problem
you're like some
was,
kind of famous.
in some areas we were, when they started playing our record in like Washington, DC, we were famous there, like people, thousands and thousands of people. We would do concerts at Toad's Place in Connecticut. I mean, we traveled anywhere from Nova Scotia down. And there were times where it had, those records had some real legs. Not super famous, but there was a smidgen of it, of popularity. But one of the things I studied with, I always had a good feel and I always had a funky feel. But I didn't have,
I just
I
did
get
a
an
little,
I
I
have
just
an
did a
idea.
shoulder dance. So
Yeah,
people can't see me, but I just did a dance.
Well, you're funky. That's the one thing.
Oh yeah, that's me. Super
Yes.
funky.
So, but what I didn't have was a sense of good natural time. And what that is the ability to start a song at a certain tempo or speed and keep that no matter what. Your responsibility as drummer is to really be that foundation of time throughout it. And there's fluctuation, but it's something that you make a determination as to how much, what's it like. And that was something I always struggled with. And that's not good if you're a drummer. So it wasn't so horrific that I couldn't play, but it was always a struggle. And when I say always, there'd be some nights it'd be better than others, but it still was taxing. And when you're playing in a 10-piece horn band, a lot of people have different ideas of time. And someone thinks it should be slower, someone thinks it should be faster. You're somewhere in the middle and you don't have that. And it was a real burden in the world of IFS. It was a burden. So we were playing in Cape Cod at this famous club called the Casino by the Sea. And the band, Steve Smith, the lead singer of our band, was cousins with John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. And they had just done the soundtrack for Eddie and the Cruisers. The movie tanked, but the soundtrack started getting steam, sold over about 3 million records. They were touring literally all over the world, and we played thousands of shows together. We were constantly touring together. So at one point, the drummer, Kenny Joe, who had great time, we were just talking and we were playing at the casino, and he said, look, I'm studying with this guy named Gary Chafee. And most drummers, if you're a drummer, you've heard of Gary Chafee. He was head of the percussion department at Berklee College of Music. And I said, what are you studying for? What are you doing? Because he was a really good, solid rock drummer. And he said, well, a lot of it is I'm studying my time. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And he talked about when they were recording how fine that is and how those increments can make just a difference, even a little fluctuation. So he was trying to be better and he was already really good. So in the goodness of his heart, he said, David, I could arrange an introduction and I'm sure he would take you on as a student. And I'm embarrassed but proud to say I was like, and I wrote in the book, I said, it sounds crazy to me now, but I was like, I'm going to practice it. And then if I get better at it, maybe I'll call him.
Yeah.
And you talk about parts.
Yeah, right.
My part was not going to take any of that in. And he tried, as I wrote about a couple of times. And, Dave, well, it could be really helpful. I found it helpful. He talked about how Gary does time feels and drums and things like that. And all the famous drummers that he's taught, like just a plethora of famous people. And I was unmoved. My parts were unmoved. Nope, I'm okay. And then finally, and I wrote, I saw his eyes just kind of gloss over where he kind of went, and he just knew there was no getting through to me.
Yeah.
And he was right. And I don't blame him one iota. So I still played for another probably 3-4 years like that. I used to practice 4 or 5 hours a day, but I never made a real difference in that aspect of my playing so that I could really just sit and drop in it and just feel confident another one of the C's of IFS.
Mhm.
I left the band. I went back to community college, and I just didn't want to do that life at that level when I was 60, and now I'm 65. So here I am and follically impaired. But I didn't want to be doing that at that level. If we were super famous, yeah, I would have done that probably for the rest of my life. But when I went to CCRI and I took my first psychology class, I made a decision that I would never, ever struggle like I did before in my drumming career. And that was 10 years of that. I said, whatever I really find important, I'm going to learn from the ground up, and I'm going to find the best teachers I can possibly find to do what it is and really be open to hearing and listening what they have to say.
Wow.
And that changed my life
Wow.
in so many different ways.
Wow, isn't it amazing? Like, it's so hard when we're going through something that like sucks. That's a clinical term. That's a clinical term. Like this really sucks. And it's so hard to be like, but this might be my greatest lesson.
It's exactly what I call it. A lot of times when I talk to people or I talk about myself, I'll say, look, my greatest life lessons are not my successes. My greatest life lessons are where something like that, where I failed or I don't like the word failure, but I couldn't hear anything and my parts were just, but later, and I wasn't studying IFS at the time, but there was this self, we might call it, or a piece that said, this isn't working for you. Yeah. And it wasn't about achieving, it was feeling confident in something you love and accepting help, because I love being around people who, I love being around people who are smart, are willing to share what they know. That just feeds me. Yeah. So that became, I surrounded myself with the best people I could find, and not like I suck at carpentry. It's not like everything I do has to be, it's going to be, I have to know every part of it. I can't seemingly cut two boards the same size, but one of my best friends, Andy, he's great at it. So when it comes time, I say, I help Andy build things in my house. And he sends me out to Home Depot or something like that.
Well, that's good, because when when you're doing stuff around your house, you go to Home Depot like 100 times. So that's a good thing. Yeah. Well, but that's part of it too. Like, to jump into this idea of responsibility, it's also responsible for me to say, I don't know how to do these things, so I'm going to ask for help. Like, so yeah, I'm not going to know everything about everything. So the smartest people, my guess is they surround themselves with people that help them with things that they don't know. I'm sure I did not say that right, but does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my mom and stepdad were here, and I was having them do a ton of stuff around my house, and we were in Home Depot, and my son says, "Why aren't you smart?" I was like, "Why am I not smart? What are you talking about?" And then we're picking up lattice and screws. And my stepfather says, "Go down here and get a driver." And my mom and I look at each other like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." And I was like, yeah, I'm not smart when it comes to Home Depot things. I don't even know what's happening right now. And that's okay, because I'm smart enough to say, who is smart? My stepfather. So I get him up here and I point and tell him to do all these projects for me, and he does it.
I think it's a beautiful gift to have that, and be able to acknowledge, I don't know, or I have no idea, or I'm not good at that, or I can find out about that, or let's ask that person. Yeah. I didn't have that before. I had it, my system was set up so that I had to do it myself, no matter what kind of agony. And it was not a good model.
Yeah. Well, probably parts. I don't know if you want to share anything about this, but my guess is there are parts that are like little exiles that are probably afraid of feeling like a failure or believing they're a failure. So if I believe I'm a failure, then these protective parts have to come on and make sure that I never fail at anything, or that I do everything perfectly, or that I'm smart at everything. So then I don't ever get to touch that vulnerability of that exile that says I'm no good.
Yeah. I didn't know it at the time, but that was exactly what was going on. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to work with a therapist that was really excellent. And although was not trained in IFS, but still had this concept of these things, and came from a more of a psychodynamic background, but not solely rooted in that. But ego states and things like that, we were working around those kinds of things. And I was able to see these parts, always younger, one in particular, 11 years old. And that 11-year-old worried a lot. But also that kid had to fix it, because there was not really anybody back then who would help. So when I got that vulnerability, like when Kenny Joe would say things, or people would comment about my time, it'd be like, I don't need any help. That's not going to happen. What do you mean? What are you saying? And then that part would protect the really vulnerable part, which was really like crying for help in a lot of different ways. So, and actually, and I saw this other, though, IFS therapist, because that was another thing in the journey of IFS, was seeing a person that was really schooled in that. And Dr. Fernando Augusto, who I adore. At one part, we were looking at a aspect of my system, and I had this worry part, and he goes, what would it be like if the worry part didn't have to worry so much, and maybe just let you know what was concerning it? And inside, and I'm not like, oh yes, it's IFS, but inside I just felt, yes, oh my God, that'd be fantastic. What woohoo! Because I had other parts that were able to deal with those kinds of things, and or self energy and things. And that was another huge gift, that because the worry part was really burdened with having to fix it as well as be aware of it.
Yeah.
So that part chose to keep its awareness of certain kinds of themes that threaten, but it didn't have to be the part that went around rectifying it or fixing it, or protecting it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Does that make sense?
It totally does, right? And then you can do it, right? You let those parts know, I'll do it. You don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. And boy, that part, and it still gets activated, but sometimes it's like, you just have to let me know. I'm gonna go play in the trees in Warwick, Rhode Island, and
I love it.
I'll be there.
I love it. Well, so I'd love to read the definitions that you have in your book. So the book is titled A Return to Civility and a Path to Get There, an exploration of responsibility, accountability, and compassion. And I'd love to read the definitions of civil and responsibility. How about we do that?
That'd be great.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. So definition of civil. And now there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, you're reading out loud. It's third grade. I'm reading out loud in front of the class.
I'm with you, my friend.
Okay, here we go. Civil, refraining from rudeness or being polite in a perfunctory way. Mm-hmm. This is the most rudimentary definition of civil and represents the minimal requirement to meet the standard. We will explore this concept later in this book. Okay, that's civil. And then responsibility, the ability to choose for oneself between right and wrong, to be accountable. And then I'm going to go ahead and read accountable. Accountable is the concept of being answerable. I liked that. Yeah, so you want to talk about these? You want to talk about these?
I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what comes up.
Go ahead. No, you please.
Okay, I know we talked about sort of what comes up for me. And when I read the definition of civil, I read it a couple of times and I thought, you know what comes up for me is like, if I'm being civil, that actually means I probably don't like you. And then I'm just being civil. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can be civil means I actually want to punch you in your face, but that would make me feel guilty and I have manners. And so I'm just being civil. Like it's the basic, I'm just using my hand slashing motion. Like I'll be civil, but that's about it.
I agree.
Is that? And I thought, is that what he means? Because I thought that's what I was thinking of it. Okay. Yeah. Tell me what happens for you with this word, because clearly this word is a powerful word and you're a word person, as I am too. And so, yeah, tell me about your passion for this word and why you wrote a book about it.
Well, some of the seeds for these words, I've worked in domestic violence. I owned an agency that we worked with people that had been arrested and convicted of domestic violence. And in working with those folks, it was clear I needed some definitions and some real foundational pieces to start when a person has gone in that particular route. And that was more around the responsibility piece, which is how do you define something that a lot of people would claim I didn't know it was wrong or I know it's right. And it's okay as long as, or she pushed my buttons. So it became really important for me to have a concrete definition of responsibility. The civility piece actually, or civil, came from my work in family systems. Because very often I would work with family systems that did not treat each other well at all. Would name call, insult, degrade, verbally abusive, those kinds of things. So the kind of ideal is that a lot of times people would say things like, I want my children to treat me with dignity and respect. And that's a wonderful place and ideal. So there was one particular family, the young lady that I saw, can I swear on a podcast?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
My father's a fucking asshole. He's a fucking prick. Fuck him. All these kinds of things. So I start meeting with the young girl, and the father she says these things, and I sit with the young girl, and she says, yeah, I say these things. Oh, okay. Well, what's the context of those things? Well, the context is that he would often call her a fucking whore, a fucking cunt, say the word, things like that, incredibly degrading. And that's where the family system was at. So I met with the dad and I said, well, you're concerned about how your daughter is talking to you, but she told me that you said these things. And I said, I want to check that out. And he said, yeah, I do. And I went, maybe the father of three daughters, but I kind of went, oh, but I asked my parts to kind of step. And I said, well, and he felt that was absolutely fine. He was validated. That was okay for him. So when I started working in families like that, I realized that dignity and respect was something that was really far away. And as a starting point, they could be civil with that basic definition, which is merely refraining from rudeness and being polite in a perfunctory way. They would have to reach to attain something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Time.
Yeah.
To do.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. A lot of times civil can be, it's like, I want to punch you in the face. But there's times where that would be an improvement.
Yeah. Right.
And especially within that context. And it's interesting you say that, because when I interviewed Dr. Dick Schwartz, when I said the definition, he said, that's a very managerial definition. And I agreed. But then we understood, I explained about where that came from.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that makes so much sense that you're like, okay, if we're all, I love the interview with him in the book. So there's an interview with Dick in the book, which is fantastic. But I love that idea, right? If we all have this fiery passion and we're all calling each other names, can we just come down to being civil? Like, what if we just came down to being civil, right? So that's not treating each other with manners or kindness or love or compassion, but just being civil. And I'm kind of doing this thing with my hands. Then that actually gives everyone a little bit of relief. Like, I'm just trying to be civil, and that actually probably would feel really good.
It would certainly be an improvement over a lot of the narrative, the rhetoric, the objectification, the polarization, especially that we see in politics. It's nothing close to being civil.
Yeah, right. And then and there's part of me, I feel like I understand this, but I'm curious, I guess, how then responsibility steps in. Like, tell me about then responsibility and the piece that plays.
Well, in the book, I talk about internal response, internal accountability, and external. And I use some examples of, if you're at a traffic light and you decide not to go through the red light, kind of condensed, but that you have a sense of internal responsibility that, yeah, this isn't the right thing to do. It makes sense to wait, as compared to the only reason I'm stopping is because there's a police officer. So if we start to move towards civility, which I define later, that comes from an internal place. That's not anything that someone can put a framework around you and say, you have to be civil, you have to treat each other with civility. Because you could say things that are civil, like you just said, and be like, I want to kill you, but I won't say that. Okay, right. I want to end your life. So I believe that there's a sense of internal responsibility that then I segue into obedience to authority by Milgram, those famous experiments, is that when people abdicate their personal responsibility, and we all do at different times, but when we abdicate our personal responsibility and we say it's because of something or somebody, then usually being civil and even civility goes right out the window. Because we're not responsible anymore, and we can say somebody else is responsible for that. So bringing that back in, like in IFS, where they say you do a U-turn, and rather than looking out, you come back towards yourself. Most people have an inner, almost all people, or maybe all do, an inner compass of, this isn't okay. But especially in our country now, and this is what really compelled me to write the book, there's obviously lots of people, and it's probably been always since the beginning of time, but that compass doesn't seem to be pointing north. In fact, I'll be as nasty as humanly possible, and that's going to work for me.
Yeah, and feel like that is appropriate, or like I'm going to be nasty and so nasty, right? The left to the right to the left, the north to the south, and be completely justified.
Yes.
And feel really justified in that, right? So whether we're talking politics or COVID, then yes, and it's very sad, actually.
And it becomes war.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing that in our country, and we're seeing that, right now. This week has been horrible. Yeah. And so what were you hoping happens with your book? I know we talked about not being able to go on the road, and we're going to go on the road together with both of our books. We've talked about that when we can. Dance party.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the only reason we're going to go. But and we're going to be like, actually, it's for the books, but not really.
Not a laugh. Great fun. My goals in writing the book. One, this is the lesser goal, which is, it was really important for me to write the book and have it published before the elections. So if there was like the butterfly effect, and there's a butterfly in Taiwan, that it could have some effect in the election in November. It would take something like that it would be like a wave in California. You said it started in Taiwan. If it could have some kind of positive effect, because I think civility should be part of how we look at, especially our leaders, because they have so much influence, as we've seen. The main part of the impetus for writing the book was to help explain how we as people, as human beings, and all of us, can lose these really important sight of these things about the importance of civility, of responsibility, of accountability, of universal principles like the principle of dignity and respect, do unto others as you have them do unto you. That there would be a way to explain, either through IFS, obedience to authority, good to great about leadership, cognitive physio mechanisms, that there was a way to explain how do we all lose our way in this. And rather than shame people about maybe that treat other people incredibly poorly, not to shame them or judge them, but say, look, this happens to all of us, and this is how it happens. And provide some explanations, which I think IFS is like a really beautiful way, because it's a non-judgmental judgmental model. Who hasn't said that, if you put my worst moments on the Jumbotron at wherever your local football or baseball team plays, that you'd be like, that's great. Boy, my worst moment. Wow, I was just, that was, no, we'd be like, oh my God.
I know. We're not going to be befriending those parts that are up there. No, no, no.
Yeah. So, but having some compassion and empathy, and it doesn't mean in my Tai Chi practice, this doesn't mean that you let people assault you, walk over you, hurt you, treat you badly. That's not that. And I'm not speaking for IFS for me. That's not compassion. That's not what compassion is. But having an understanding, compassion for ourselves when we fall short, having compassion for others when they fall short, because shaming people and, oh, you're wrong, and you want to wear a mask, you don't wear a mask, or COVID or this, that doesn't work at all.
And we can see it. We see it's not working. We feel it's not working.
And there are people, or in IFS would say people that have, sometimes Mike Elkin says people colonized by their parts. We have people that there's no self to be found that I can certainly see. And they actually feed on that division and polarization and hating somebody else. That's I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of saying, how can we move together? How can we see the common humanity? How can we have laughs?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, right. And I think about the listeners that could be getting triggered right now as we're talking about this stuff. And I was just thinking, how can we then have compassion for that person that I'm not seeing any self? It's all I'm seeing is parts, and I'm seeing the hatred, and I'm seeing all of that stuff coming from that and feeling that from that person. And wow, how could I drum up some compassion for their parts? Because I know I'm only seeing their parts. I'm pointing my finger right now. I'm only seeing their parts. And it's so hard when we're hurt and we're angry and we have parts, right? So my parts are responding to their parts. Yeah, but if we, go ahead.
So go ahead. No,
you.
And scared. I mean, what happened on January 6th, that's not, there's not any more dialogue at that particular juncture.
No.
That's different.
Yeah.
And that's horrifying, terrifying, traumatic. What's happened to those poor police officers, Capitol and Metropolitan, and the trauma that they've incurred. Those points, you cannot, I don't believe a person's self is reachable in those kind of situations, or very, very rarely.
Right. Well, you're in that like acute like firefighter activity or something, right? Like you're not able to be reached in that, right? And then there's this group mentality and this it's just, scary.
And even in that, because I do have hope, I call myself a pragmatic optimist. I'm very realistic. I'm very optimistic, but not at the expense of being realistic. But one of the police officers that testified, when he said, I have children, and there were a couple of people, even in that riot, that somehow got him off to the side, because he would have been, I feel, and he certainly said that he would have been killed otherwise.
Wow.
So even in that, there was some compassion there, but as a whole, no.
Yeah. Well, from compassion, and maybe this is me being a little Pollyanna, because I have a part that can be very Pollyanna, but there is my guess is that there were probably a lot of people, maybe some people there, they didn't really know what they were getting into. And when it got crazy like that, they were like, whoa. And so maybe some of those protesters didn't really realize what was happening there. I don't know.
Well,
that could be my Pollyanna part.
No, I think there were people, from what I understand, and people that I know that work in government, there was definitely people there that had an agenda. And they went there
clearly. Right.
To do bad things.
Definitely.
There were other people that pulled along. But when we go back to that leadership piece, like in the book, Good to Great, Obedience to Authority, there are also many, many people that take what is said as the truth.
Yeah, and they were following a leader, in air quotes, that they thought was something. Yeah. So let me read this principle of responsibility at the end of the book. How about that? And then we can shift gears.
Okay.
This is a little bit longer. So my third grade part is going to be a little bit more stressed about this. Okay, the principal the principal responsibility. Don't make me laugh.
I'm sorry.
The
I just-
ability. Go
I
ahead.
didn't know that the 3-year-old part had such.
The third grader. My 3-year-old part doesn't know
Okay.
how to read. She's
Oh,
3.
My mistake.
My 3-year-old could not read this.
Why not?
The principal responsibility, the ability to respond and act in accordance with universal truths, we talked about that, grounded in morality, such as do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The principle of dignity and respect, and to recognize the intrinsic value of all human beings, to be able to move to more fully embody the entity and qualities of self, however you may define it, the qualities such as compassion, civility, dignity, respect, and kindness, and to guide us to be curious and compassionate towards ourselves and others when we are not. Furthermore, responsibility includes a framework, a type of duty to acknowledge, to attend, and to, what is that word?
Ameliorate. To address. Now I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
I know. The pain and suffering. How about
Yeah.
to lessen the pain and suffering of oppressed people? You were using your thesaurus. Groups and cultures. Civility. I mean, you might just know that word. Civility. That which occurs when people treat each other with dignity, respect, and kindness. It's beautiful. Like civility comes out of that. Sorry, that's not what you said. That was my.
But that's the meaning behind it.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
So civility is what occurs when people treat each other with dignity, respect, and kindness, and embrace, I love this, the interconnectedness and inherent value of all human beings, and love it, the planet we live on.
Mm.
Beautiful. I love it. You want to say anything about that? The redefining of responsibility and civility?
It was an arduous process to try to encapsulate things.
Yeah.
I was really happy where it ended up. And the principle of responsibility is almost more like a theorem. And that, I referred to my father-in-law, who we came up with the principle of responsibility, that name, when I was working in domestic violence. But it really, to me, it encapsulates what it is. It could go on longer, but then I would rather have it shorter, but I really couldn't condense it more. I could use a piece of it and say, okay, this is it, but I really needed to flesh it out. And to me, it encompasses, encapsulates what that is.
Yeah.
Civility I like because it's so much more concise.
Yeah.
And it is what occurs, or maybe like Dick would say, that's what civility occurs naturally when you're in self. And I agree.
And it's a C word. So there you go.
Yeah. Many people have tried to add an extra C to Dick's 8 C's to know.
I don't think he likes it. I've heard that he's not a fan.
I think he's got his 8. Dick, if you're watching, I support you.
We will do whatever you say.
But with the civility piece, to me, that's when you see people or in different areas where they're civil. They're not civil, just the perfunctory part, but like acts of kindness, opening a door for somebody, seeing an elderly person and saying, hey, do you want to go first? Letting somebody go at a traffic light that's making a turn, a kind word. It's a very different energy.
I love that.
I remember one time when we went out to California to promote the album, and I played in a lot of tough places in my life, and we went out to California, and we were in Huntington Beach, and we stayed with a guy who used to play in the band, Scott Jackson, who was a drummer, and people were coming by on roller skates and kind of like the stereotypical California life, but people would come by, hey, how you doing? I was like, hey, how are you? Oh, Scott, checking my wallet. I was all bound up. He was like, no, people, that's how people talk over here. I was like,
Crazy.
get out of here.
I know. I love it.
So,
go ahead.
No, just that to me is like, it's not fake. It's just, that's how it is. And then the planet piece, and I like, should I include that? But I don't think it can be. To me, civility is not when you get a bag of trash and you throw it out of your car.
Yes,
all
right.
kinds of stuff. We're seeing now what's happening in the planet. So that became another important thing for me to include.
I love it. I love that you included that. So normally I start the podcast with asking where you're from or where you live. And you've said you've dropped Rhode Island. You dropped that one of your parts was hanging out in Rhode Island. So you still live in Rhode Island, right?
I still do, yes.
Okay. So I think that's the other thing is that where you're from, I think, or where you live has a lot to do with sort of what the energy of people, right? So if I was walking down the street and I said hi to someone, they might be like, what do you want? You want something? They might look at you like, what? Where if I think you live in different places, they might have a different response.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm with you.
Yeah, you're agreeing with me. Good. My parts like that.
Well, it's funny because Tammy said before, you people weren't privy to it. She said, agree with me, David. I said,
Yeah, exactly.
I said, yes, I agree.
David is also now bowing down, which I super appreciate.
And I want to mow your lawn.
Oh, please.
It
I would
make me feel happy.
Yeah, promise. I'm going to need it mowed again in a couple of weeks. So you're coming up. You said you're going to come up and hang out with me. So
I love to.
Okay, that's done. Mow my lawn and then we'll go get something to eat.
You got static. I can't. Can you speak into the microphone? I can't hear you. I heard come and hang out. Okay, I didn't hear the rest.
Okay, tell me about the foundation and what you're doing. So in a week, I know it's short timing, but in a week, you're doing something super cool with the Foundation for Self-Leadership. Mm-hmm. Tell me about this. Is it a workshop? It's a conversation workshop thing.
Yeah, it's a web series, and I believe there's 5 now. And myself and Vicky McCoy are going to be the lead off of that. And from what I'm super excited. And from what I understand, it's also going to be available internationally. And there's different subjects, but with under the umbrella of IFS, and different kinds of conversations about race, global politics. Vicky and I's piece is going to be around civility and responsibility and how IFS fits into those things. And for her, kind of like with us, it's really a dialogue where we're really talking about things and what the challenges are to embrace those kinds of things personally, and especially in the polarized environment we're in now. Definitely not be like, well, I've written this book and I'm pretty well self-actualized. I think in the book, I've included some really hard things to write down, at least for me. So there's nothing about this holier than thou, and really, really level setting it that we all struggle in these areas. And,
Right. Like, so it's not like I walk around in self all the time, and that's where I live. I live up here in self all the time. All my parts are out the playground roller skating.
Yes. Yeah. So we're having a dialogue. Tufik Hakim is going to be the introducing it and has put it together, and we're looking to communicate this to a global audience, and but not, again, just and kind of like sitting down and 2 people talking about what they may be able to add to the conversation.
I love it. So the title, so it's going to be Fridays, 3 p.m. for 75 minutes, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And your title is From Fight or Flight to Dialogue, Turning Inward Toward a Path to Civility. Mm-hmm. Love it. I love it. And so it's going to run from September 3rd to October 1st. And if people are interested, it looks like you can just go to the foundation's website. Is that right?
That's what I understand.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well, I'm a little technically challenged. So to say that I had the technical knowledge of a chimpanzee would be an insult to a chimpanzee. So I would defer to you, my friend.
Okay, so first of all, that's not true because look at you, you're on Zoom, so you're totally fine. You're doing a podcast. So I want to challenge the part of you that believes that.
Okay.
Okay.
I would just like to say, if it wasn't for my wife.
Oh, she did set you up. That's true. Thank you. Thank you, wife, and happy birthday to her.
My Trisha, yes.
I'll put a link to in the show notes, but it's foundationifs.org/bridge. And I'll put that. So the foundation is different than the IFS Institute. There's the IFS Institute, and then there's the Foundation for Self-Leadership. And they're like cousins. Would we say they're cousins?
Yes. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, just really honored to be a part of the whole thing.
Yeah,
Can you
I would
talk
love that.
about what's your book about?
Yeah, so my book is called The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. And I'm also a word person. And so I love words and I'll use words as goals. And so like say if I'm going on vacation, I'll think, okay, what's my goal and my intention for the vacation? And it'll be a word, like one word. And instead of a New Year's resolution, I pick a word. So every year I pick one word. And so I had this idea a couple of years ago of doing like a 30-day little, like you would read it almost kind of like a 30-day like devotion or like, yeah. So what I ended up doing was I did one word a day and it walks you through the IFS model. It was very simple. I hope it's really clear. And you read one word a day and there's a little kind of like for practice today, like a mindfulness thing. And it walks you through in 30 days. It walks you through at the end, you do an unburdening. We talk about self and parts and clarity and curiosity and all those really important words. And yeah, so it's going to be hopefully like super cute and little and something that people can just take with them as they go and they would read, they could do it 30 days in a row, one word a day. So yeah, that's what it is. And I'm super excited about it.
That sounds fantastic.
So hopefully it'll be out late fall, maybe beginning of next year.
I shall buy it.
I will send it to you. No, I will send it to you. You sent me your book with the sweetest little note. I will send you a book with a note.
I accept.
Good.
But I love the concept. Having it something like when I go on vacation, I always read Thich Nhat Hanh's Miracle of Mindfulness beforehand because it helps me wash the dishes, the cup of tea in your hand, and it helps settle me. Yeah. But it's not this, 3-year process.
Yes.
And I love this process of taking something, having something to do for that amount of time. It's a great concept.
Well, especially if I think you and I are similar, that I get easily distracted. I got a little ADD. I'm a little all over the place. And so often one word will just anchor me.
What did you say?
Oh my gosh.
It was a canary. Holy moly. Okay. All right, I'm back. All right.
Good, I'm glad. I said something really smart. You missed it.
Oh, wow.
So what else, is there anything else you want to say before I ask the last question I always ask everybody?
I super dig you. You have a light in you. I just couldn't be happy to be still continuing our connection and our friendship through all of this. I just really cherish you. I do.
Thanks. Okay. So last question. If you were not doing all you do, I know you do a lot, and you had to do something different, what would you do instead?
Mm-hmm. So in answer to your question, this is my music room.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm seeing a very fancy set of drums and a guitar and all kinds of equipment.
Music stuff. This is the drum set I used the entire time of my career.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. It looks brand new.
I had it all refinished.
Wow.
So the answer to your question is if I had to do anything else, it would be back in a band. And it would be the kind of band that had several different hits and would be touring, but instead of being out constantly would be tour maybe, 3-4 months a year. And my family would be with me or not, but in travel in style, but I would still be able to play.
It's time to get funky.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.